Welcome to Paradox Culture Podcast. We're back this week. Paradox Culture Podcast is on episode number 6. We are so excited about, doing 6 episodes already. Time is flying. So in this podcast, as a Paradox Culture, we like to talk about when our words and life don't always say the same thing. And so today we have a special guest with us. I'm so excited to welcome him there. You see him on the screen, Mr. Ted Lowe. And God has crossed Ted and I's paths together. And man, I'm so thankful for him and what he has been doing for marriages around the world. Ted is a speaker, author, podcast host, director of marriedpeople.com. And he is a fantastic guy above all that. So also a husband of Nancy and their 3 wonderful children. And just getting the 4. Sorry.
Yeah, we added one. I must have sent you an old bio.
You added one since the last time.
Yeah, we truly did. We truly did. So, yeah.
So, Ted has been involved in full-time ministry, working as a married pastor with Andy Stanley. And then now, Ted, you are now working with Orange Curriculum. Is that correct?
It is. I oversee marriedpeople.org, which is the marriage division of Orange. So, yeah. So, good times. Good times.
Ted was with us at First Snellville. When was that? Back in February 14th, actually.
So fun. So fun to be with you guys.
Yeah, he did a marriage conference for us and did a fantastic job, and it was a lot of fun. So, again, Ted, thanks for coming on to the Paradox Culture Podcast. And we're going to have fun today. And so I'm going to kick it over to Philip. When we have a special guest, we always grill them with some rapid fire questions. So we just want your first initial thoughts on these questions, okay? It helps our audience get to know you a little bit. So Philip, take it away with those questions.
All right, Ted. So we got a couple things for you. First of all, where are you from, or where did you grow up at?
I grew up in a little tiny town in Alabama called Center, Alabama.
Okay. What's that close to?
So nothing. Actually, it's about 2 hours from Atlanta. So
okay, not far.
Yeah, right over the Georgia border. That's right.
Okay, so pancakes or waffles?
Ooh, I'm gonna go with pancakes.
All right, good man. That's a good choice. Good choice. All right, chocolate versus just regular candy, like sweet candy.
Ooh, sweet candy, like the kind that you go, this is from a factory. Like this is not anything about food. Yeah, that kind of candy I love.
All right. Camping or hotel?
Hotel.
All right. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Beach. All right. Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime?
Ooh, I love them all.
They're all great.
Right. I'm going to go with Netflix.
Okay. We got to throw Disney Plus in there too, because that's
true.
Your thing then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ted. Instagram or Facebook?
Instagram.
Instagram. All right. Falcons or Braves?
Or neither.
Falcons.
Falcons. All right. Wings or burgers?
Burgers.
All right. Old Testament or New Testament?
New Testament. I need grace.
We all do. Andy or Louie?
Oh, gosh. I like a diet of 75% Andy and 25% Louie.
Okay.
I had to throw that last question in there because I'm sure you've worked with both of them at some point in your career. So
a little bit more with Andy than with Louie, but I love both those guys. Are tremendous.
Yes. Cool. All right.
Very cool.
Great job on the rapid fire. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper question here. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Don't talk so much.
Really?
I really do think it's quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I'm not great at it all the time, but I just think, I've learned way too late as a husband and as a parent just to go, quiet is sometimes your best choice. Often.
Now, that's probably hard for you because you're a talker, right? You that's your natural personality.
I'm too much of a talker. remember report cards used to say things like inclined to mischief and talks too much? Mine always got both of those. So yeah, that's yeah, that is hard. I'm an extrovert, so that can be, and ADHD. And people with ADHD don't think a lot of times before they speak. It's real reactive. So I'm the perfect storm over here for making bad choices with my words.
Chasing after your words after they leave your mouth, then, huh?
Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah. What were you thinking? I wasn't.
All right. So today, because we have you, our great special guest here with us to talk about marriage, and in the paradox culture, we try to bring up topics that like where we as Christians might live our words, we might talk about things in one way, but then sometimes the reality of our life definitely doesn't match up with what our words are saying. And it's been said. So our paradox question or thought today is, marriages are supposed to be a picture of the gospel. And if that's true for Christians, then sometimes our pictures look pretty blurry as far as Christian couples. I don't want to dive into statistics because you make statistics say anything you want, basically. But, the Christian marriage statistic versus the non-Christian marriage statistic of staying together, there's not a lot of difference there, unfortunately, when you see the divorce rate between those two. So, I think there's something for us to dive in and look at a little bit today and kind of explore that. Like, why are our pictures so blurry when it comes to that? What a godly marriage looks like, and especially if it's supposed to represent how God loves loves people and loves the lost and his children. So, real quick, as kind of set up our context here, we look at Ted, you look at scripture, and the first question we have to ask, okay, where did marriage come from, right? So if it's supposed to be godly, then we don't want to just assume where did it come from? Well, it comes from God, and we know that based on his word. And we see God officiating that first wedding in the garden with Adam and Eve. It was awesome. It was great. They got to walk around naked. And, I don't know. People like that nowadays, but.
Naked and unashamed. Yep.
Yeah.
It's
So.
pretty be naked and unashamed. That's the show that we should be watching, but it's not.
Especially after COVID. I mean, gosh.
Don't even.
Some LB's been added there for sure.
That is very true. The COVID-19 pounds. Yep.
So we see this first picture of marriage show up in Genesis, right? And it's a beautiful picture. It's great. But then something happens. We all know the story, right? They sin. They disobey God's command, a simple command. And they eat of the forbidden fruit of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil. And then they realize that, wow, I am naked and I am ashamed, and that there it starts spiraling out of control. And can you imagine that first marriage argument? I've often played this in my head many a times, what do you think, Ted, that argument went like?
It's just like ours, one of us does something and the other one blames them. Oh, look what she did, yeah, I think there's a lot of, hey, I didn't do this, you did this. We see, we don't see our part in it, we see their part in it. But yeah, that had to be an interesting moment. That is for sure.
See what you did? You got us kicked out of the perfect place.
And they've made things hard for the rest of us.
That's right. And
so
it continues.
Thanks, Adam and Eve. Great work there. Good choices.
Well, then we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 8. Paul's talking to the church of Corinth, and basically they're asking him, is it a sin to get married, or should people that aren't married get married? And he basically says, no, it's not a sin to be married, but if you don't have to be married, basically I would recommend that you don't. And then he goes on to say, basically, yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you of that, is what Paul says. So I mean, it kind of backs up Genesis, right? Hey, here it comes,
Yeah, look out. I can tell you two things. It's a mystery, and this is going to be tough. No, I hear what you're saying. It's, I think with marriage, it is tough. And you talk about how, the Christian marriage is supposed to look one way, and then um, it should look different than the world. I think one of the things that as church leaders that we've kind of got to own for the last, as marriage ministry has been a thing, is the part leaders, we paint this perfect picture of what it's supposed to look like, or even portray what it's supposed to look like. And I think a lot of people are sitting there going, if that's what I'm supposed to be, I can't be that. And if I'm not like that, I better not tell anybody. I think there's so many people that come to church on Sunday and they sit there and they think they're the only ones that maybe are struggling. So I think there's this need, when we paint this perfect picture, that people tell us what we want to hear. We're like the needy, pleasing children. Like we all, our kids have different personalities. We've got a couple that are real pleasers. And it also kind of makes them dishonest because they're trying to keep us pleased. And I think that's a little bit of this whole idea of that, one is a Christian marriage, with its words are one thing and its actions are another, is they feel I don't think it's from a bad place, actually. I think they're just trying to please, and they feel shameful about it. And they don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, that's so true. I think people aren't real with themselves. And, we talk about the church mask a lot, and we wear it. And then therefore, when we do go out into the world and our marriage isn't perfect, then the world says, you're a bunch of hypocrites. And the fact is, we all are, and we have been.
I think that one of the harder things, especially for any of us that would stand on stage, is we want to paint this picture of what marriage is supposed to look like, what obviously Scripture tells us it should look like. But then as communicators, I think we kind of build up this idea of how ours should look to other people, and it's hard for us to be real as communicators sometimes, because it's like, well, if we're going to stand up on a stage and talk about it, shouldn't we absolutely be doing that? And it can be hard sometimes to get up there and say, hey, here's some things that I'm flawed in and what I'm having trouble with. And I think that some of that, talk about being honest with where we are, not just from an audience standpoint, but from the communicator standpoint, up on that stage being, look, and I try and remind our young adults, I'm no better than anyone else. I'm just a little bit ahead of the curve because I've done it before you guys did.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a hard place to sit at sometimes.
It is. And we decided early on, we'd only been married 6 years when we started doing marriage ministry, which I look back now and I go, I can't believe a church offered me a job to do that. I don't know who's dumber, them for asking or us for saying yes, or for me for saying yes. But I felt this tremendous amount of pressure at first to have it all figured out or have it all together. And my pastor was really, he really helped me with that. He said, Ted, people will learn more out of your weaknesses than sometimes out of your strength. And so we would talk 4 times a year at church. And I remember this lady comes up to Nancy afterwards and she says, I can't believe you let him share all that. And I always just share where I'm messed up, right? I'm never going to throw her under the bus. But it was this moment of like, wow, she was like, I couldn't do that. I think we have to be vulnerable enough to show our imperfections. But I've also watched people swing it so far to the other side that they want people to so know that they're normal that I won't say they invent things, but they'll get maybe too deep. Like, because I don't mind telling people that we have a great marriage. It's not perfect. We used to struggle quite a bit, and now we have a really great marriage. And I think sometimes communicators, we feel bad for even saying that. So I think it's all about being vulnerable and being, because here's the thing, I don't want to hear from somebody that's been in marriage ministry forever and telling me they have a junky marriage, because basically they're saying they don't know what they're talking about. Like if a mechanic shows up and his truck's falling apart, kind of like, back on up, buddy. I'm going to YouTube. I'll fix this sucker myself. So I think it's this balance of truth, it's authenticity. I think people, especially millennials, are craving authenticity and vulnerability, but also people that learn, like they've learned how to change things. And people, we say it like this: we say hope, that struggle is normal, but hope is available. Like we've got to do both. We can't just, it's a big struggle, it's terrible, and it's awful, and it's all this hard work. But over here, I think we have to tell them, but there's hope based on that. So I just think it's a balance. I feel like right now it's about honesty and authenticity with people. I think that's what people are craving right now. Just be real, but give me hope.
So as we're talking about this topic, like the picture of our marriage should display the gospel, and bringing that back into this conversation, that, as you're saying, we can be authentic in that picture because Jesus was always, he dealt with the sinner where they were, not where he was going to take them, right?
Exactly.
And so I think it's important, as you just said, it's important that we're real because the lost world's watching to see if we're fake or not.
Yeah.
You know? So what are some common, Ted, you deal with a lot of people, you talk with a lot of marriages, you're involved in that, I don't want to say industry, but that ministry aspect, that's what God's called you to really focus in on. So what are the common things that you're seeing in marriages these days that are really like some of those pitfalls that are just very common to derailing people right now?
Yeah, I think with COVID-19, and it kind of pushed everybody indoors, and it took all their tensions and their stresses, and then added some global size stressors to that, and then cranked down the pressure and says, "Don't leave your house."
Yeah.
And so we were kind of set up for this crazy time. And I mentioned Nancy and I have a great marriage, but I'm telling you, 2 weeks in, we were like, whoa, this is like old school Ted and Nancy. Like, what is happening? So I think right now, I think it is revealing some things. I'm not a big fan right now of talking about big ticket items that couples are talking about because they're just too stressed out. I had a counselor tell me one time, said, don't ever make lifelong decisions when you're super emotional. So people go, how can we have these really important conversations? I'm like, dude, you need to just be nice right now. Like, that'll all be here. You need to take a breath. You need to be each other's safe place. But I think people really struggle because I feel like with home, there's a safety that we can use for our benefit and our devastation for our marriage. Like, people come home and they're safe to talk how they want to talk. If they don't talk the right way at work, if they don't talk the right way with strangers, and even have this internal need to be nice to the clerk at the gas station, which is great. I think when people come home, they let their guards down. And they could either come down and go, oh, thank goodness we're home. I mean, the number one time couples are fighting is when they reconnect at the end of the day. Well, they're connecting all day during all this COVID-19. So I think people treat each other, sometimes their spouse, that way because no one's watching. They're tired of being so controlled. But people say, she brings out the worst in me. No, she's revealing the brokenness in you, or he's revealing the brokenness in you. So I think people come home and let their guards down. And there's one thing about being comfortable with each other, but it's not, God told me early on in our marriage, he goes, don't treat your wife like a dump truck. Like, here's all my yuck from the day. I think the biggest issue that we're experiencing right now, and we're experiencing it all the time, is people are trying to get most of their relational needs, which are all legitimate. A lot of people are trying to get their spouse to meet all of those.
Yeah.
And they're all legitimate. I mean, we all want to feel affirmed and loved unconditionally. We have all these needs. Dr. Sue Johnson says in her book, Hold Me Tight, she says, we try to get from our spouses what our grandparents used to get from a village. So people lived in a village and they hung out with people and, had relational needs that my dad would meet. I have relational needs that my brother and my friends and my mom and all these different things. Now, we're trying to get them met from everybody. Single people do this way better, I think, than married people. Single people know that they have to treat the people around them with kindness and consideration and mutual focus on each other, not making it all about them. They understand they have different friends, different relational needs. There's something that happens. I don't know what communicated this to us, that when we get married, you're supposed to be my everything. It's that classic movie, Jerry Maguire, You Complete Me.
Right.
Oh gosh, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the person sitting across from you sees all your imperfections and it's now their job to fix them? Things you've had since you were born. And so I think it's just taking that pressure off of them and saying, right now, where can you get some of these other relational needs met? I mean, even if you're stuck at home, like, who do you need to call? Who do you need to walk with? Because we're trying to get more from our spouse when they've never had less to give us.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things that's going on. And I think what we can learn from these times when things get tough, it kind of makes you look at things. It's kind of say, regardless of what happens, COVID-19, if it all switches tomorrow and it all goes back to normal, you still need to get your needs met by somebody other than just your spouse. And obviously, I'm talking about legitimate needs. We all know I'm not talking about
Right.
emotional needs by a member of the opposite sex. But, who are those people that can pour into you? I mean, we go on vacation, just the two of us, Nancy and I, and then she goes right with her friends, and I'll go with my buddies. And we're always laugh. We're hard pressed to say which one of those did the most for our marriage, because we need that. We need both of those. But yeah, I think that's one of the most common things is people are they're so needy of their spouse. They're really comfortable with their spouse. So you get this double whammy of, I'm going to kind of be the yuckiest version of myself and expect you to be the best version of yourself. And it just doesn't add up.
And so that leads to all the different, like, from what you said is like, you went to like the nucleus. You didn't deal with like, okay, this is a symptom. This is what problems are, because that's the nucleus of the problem. Right. So I asked you, I appreciate that. You took the question deeper and you said, okay, yeah, we're going to have always these symptoms that play themselves out in our marriage, but what is the nucleus that's causing these common problems? And one of them is that we're searching for our spouse to complete this need that only God can complete. And most, totally, he's the only one that can do that for us. But yet we're expecting our spouse and husband or wife to take on all that. And what I heard, it might've been you and I talking, but talking about how you go away, used to in our normal rhythm of life was spouse goes away or they're apart from each other. They come back and there's a time of reconnecting and, oh, I missed you kind of thing. And now it's like Groundhog Day.
It's Groundhog Day. It is.
I mean, you're getting up and you're doing the same thing and seeing the same faces every day and having probably some of the same conversation and arguments same, every day.
Yes, it is. You have more opportunities for everything. The more opportunities to love each other, more opportunities to get frustrated with each other. There's just more opportunities abound. They're everywhere. And you make a good point, Trent. I want to back up just a second on the having needs met that only God can meet. That's just not church speak, right? I mean, it is. I know when I sit down with Jesus, and the way I do that is I journal my prayers. I know some guys just I type them, because if I don't, I'll be all over the place. And it's not like poetry. It's like random thoughts from a madman. But it's this thing of going, I need to get my needs met from Jesus and connect that way, that he's the one that's validating that I am who I am. And then I'm not going to her. Example for us was we speak a lot. And I remember saying to Andy Stanley, I was telling him that Nancy helps me with my messages, and he goes, why would you do that? And I went, because she's really smart and she knows me. And he goes, no. He goes, if you were a chemist, would you come home and run your equations by her? He said, you're not wanting feedback from her. You're wanting affirmation from her. And so it was this tension of me trying to get something that she could not give me. And so I just think there's those moments when we expect God-sized things, or even human-sized things, just to give them a break. I mean, I've even noticed right now with like questions. Nancy told me, she says, there's 6 of us here. And she says, I feel like people are asking me questions that they could just Google. And so mom, you know how moms is. It's not lost until mom says it's lost. But I watch, every time there's a question, there's a degree of an agenda. Hey, have you seen mine? Coat means, can you get up and go find it?
Right.
It's just those questions, and I'm just thinking, going, all right. I don't know. The word neediness just keeps coming back to mind, where you're getting your needs met.
Yeah. And, now too, children always play a different role in the marriage. And so you got this microscope like kids notice everything about your relationship with your spouse. And when you're speaking unkind to one another or when you're being kind to one another, and now that's been times 1,000.
Yeah.
It was already times 100. Now we're at 1,000, and now you have kids speaking into your marriage problems. Like,
Yes.
Dad, why are you so mean to mommy all the time? Things like that. Or, Mom, why are you so mean to Dad? He's just trying to do, whatever. So I've heard couples talking about how that's just been more gasoline to some of that fire that's already going on.
True. Very true.
I think it was, you did an event recently, your best night. Normally your conference is your best night out, but you did it your best night in. And proud to say that we're going to be able to host that or rebroadcast, I would say, that event coming this Friday. And I'm really excited about it because it's so good, so quality. And one of the tweets that you have going on at the beginning during the countdown was, I forgot exactly, but basically the guy tweets out and he says, my wife looked at me and she says, if we're going to be here together, you're going to have to stop doing that. And he said, what? And she says, just looks him up and down and says, that.
Yeah.
Oh, I can just visualize that conversation,
Yes. All of you is driving all of me crazy. Yeah. It is. Yeah. It's
so
unique.
It's kind of like we've all experienced what I hear retired couples experience. Like you hear about the husband that retires finally from his job, and he comes home and he gets all up in his wife's business and in her routine, and she doesn't know how to handle it. And there's a new created tension in that relationship. And it's like 2 months ago, we're all forced into retirement, so to speak,
Oh, well, this one friend of mine, he says people are getting a preview of what their empty nester years are going to look like on an early basis. NFL athletes or professional athletes, after they retire, have an 80% divorce rate. And I interviewed Brett Butler one time way back in the day, and his wife was saying, we have a way of doing things with our kids. Like she's had to learn how to survive without him. And then again, he comes home. And so I think that's what people are, Nancy's thing to me, she goes, everybody's in everybody's business about everything. What used to be, everything's my business, all these things that we do on our own. And they're like, hey, they start questioning, what are you doing that for?
Right.
Because that's the way I do it. There's those moments. Our worlds have collided. And that's not easy.
But I think there's some beauty here that we can really grab onto. And my prayer has been for our married couples that are struggling together, that, without the friction, things aren't sharpened, and I really pray that if we can hang on and do what you said, I think it goes back to what you were saying, is just that need has to be met by Jesus, and we got to figure out time to spend with Jesus. Otherwise, that's going to go really badly. It's going to continue to go badly, And I just hope that Christian marriages at the end of this, and even now in Georgia, we're here in Georgia, and we're starting to kind of regain some traction of whatever normal life is going to look like. But, God, I just really hope that when Christian marriages go back into the world and we start doing relationships with others, that maybe we look different than before.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we've gotten opportunities to practice. Like one of the things with my kids, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she's a 15-year-old daughter. Like God bless her. I mean, I cannot imagine being a 15-year-old girl right now with social media and all the different pieces. And one of the things the counselor had said to us, that the most powerful position as a parent is neutral. So I'll catch myself emotionally reacting like I'm a 15-year-old girl. Like she's doing, it's not logical, she's not being logical, she's not being whatever. And I'm like, don't you understand that's not logical? Which is so effective.
Right.
Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. That is more logical. Thank you. My hormones just went back to the right place. But it was very interesting. I had like one interaction where I did that number. Like, I can't believe you. You need to calm down. And then because we're quarantined, just a few minutes later, it happened again, and I got to practice again. I did it with our 20-year-old that's just come home, like to go. He wanted to leave and do all this stuff. I got super frustrated. We had this big old thing. The next time, I said, sorry, bud, this is just kind of how we're running this a little bit. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to you. And 2 sentences later, he was done. So I think right now, I get excited about people going, all right, we're trapped inside. We are about to be released a little bit to go, let's try something different. Let's try something different. Pick 3 things that you've got opinion about that you could not have an opinion about. What is those battles you're not fighting? Like, what's that thing that you don't agree with them, but you can just let it go? Like, it makes 0 sense that we're making our bed during COVID-19. It doesn't make sense for me to make it on a normal day.
Right.
And it's not just make the bed. Like, you take the pillows that you really use and you stack them against the headboard. And because they're not fit for human consumption, or it would blind you, put the fake pillows in front of those, which are in pillow shams, which I call pillow scams. And then in front of the pillow scams, you put 3 other pillows that are for no reason. There are people in the world with no pillows, and we have 5 extra at our house.
Right.
That COVID-19, we make that bed every day. Now, that's not good for me, but it's good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those things. I mean, that's not logical. I mean, I could whatever about that, but there's just those things. You just go, next time you got to look, do I need to even have an opinion about this?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's these time to practice, and because it is, you can kind of see results. Like, what would happen is, if you wake up grouchy, you just decide to like fake it till you make it. Act like it's your boss you're trying to be nice to. I mean, people get remarkably controlled and polished when they're in people that they think hold influence in their lives. People, I can't be rude at work, right? Because I might get fired. So much hangs in the balance. You're like, you're probably going to leave that job. You're for sure going to be irrelevant at work, but you're never going to be irrelevant at home. So I think it's those things of going, let's practice some of our sense of self-control, which is one of the fruits of the spirit, right? Like, let's try something new. And it just feels good. I mean, like that whole parenting thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been such an idiot for so long. Just let it go.
Yeah.
A little frozen, let it go.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I heard a Christian author, counselor one time, and it was a marriage conference. And I'm racking my brain, and I cannot remember who it was. But basically, you talked about making your bed, and one of his most practical ways to love your spouse, and I want to dive into this in a minute because we can't talk about marriage without talking about Ephesians 5. So I want to jump into that in just a minute.
It's in a marriage rule book.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But okay. He was just simply giving the example of like, hey, when you make your bed, take that time to pray for that spouse.
That's good.
And I'm like, because you and I'm in the same camp as you. I'm like, making the bed does nothing for me. It doesn't give me any satisfaction. Right. But I know my wife loves it, and she loves to come into the bedroom at night and see that bed made with all the fake pillows that we aren't using. And, so if that makes her happy, then why do I have to fight that battle?
Totally. Yeah.
And, but I just thought that was such a practical thing. Okay, I could spend time.
Yeah.
Making that
30 seconds.
Yeah.
30 seconds. And that's, Trent, that's what I've loved about getting to know you guys over the years is you want it to be so practical, right?
Yeah.
It's so doable. I mean, if the number one time couples are fighting at the end of the day, what if it was a 30-second prayer going? I mean, even for non-believer to go, I think there's God. I mean, if there is God, would you help me to be a better version of myself to my spouse? Because they deserve it and I want it too. But it's those moments, especially as believers. I mean, like, we don't have a lot of excuse to act the way we do. Like, come on, guys. I mean, come on, Ted. You got to do better than that. But I think it's just those moments of going, Jesus, would you do this? Because right now, I don't feel you, and I'm probably not going to respond the best right now.
Mm-hmm. My words are not going to be sweet as honey and kind.
Nope. Mm-mm.
So Ephesians 5, 23 through 33 really is that whole chapter. and I'm going to skip over 23 because all the men like to talk about verse 23 because that's the submission verse,
Can you back us up to 21?
Oh, why? I don't have it. Got to get my Bible out.
Trent said why?
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but here's then we jump right into 23. It says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That's why that verse gets skipped a lot, I think. It is submit to one another. Yeah, man, that's you too. But the biggest thing of that is that out of reverence for Christ, like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I submitting to her? And why is she submitting to me? Like, why am I doing this? Not because she deserves it, but because I'm doing what Jesus, it's out of response for what Jesus did for me instead of what she's doing for me. Because if I only submit to her to get something, like, why am I submitting to her? Because if we respond based on their response, that's a recipe for disaster. And it doesn't allow them to have any emotions either, right? But if our response is like, I'm going to love her when she's not lovable. I'm going to love him when he's not lovable because God loved me when I was way unlovable.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where you kind of stuff starts to matter. You kind of go, oh, and it's not easy, but it's effective.
Definitely. Yeah. I always I think sometimes as a man, I'm always harder on the men, and you and I have had this conversation.
Right.
That's why a lot of men don't ever want to go to a marriage conference or marriage classes because they feel like they're always the punching bag in that class, but I don't know.
Good. Let's pick on the women. Can I pick on the women a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead and you pick on the women. I'll pick on the men.
Okay. You go first. Sorry.
Let me go first.
I told you I was ADHD. I got you off track.
Yeah. Well, just 25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word. And I just think about that verse and I'm like, okay, men, going back to our question, if our marriages are supposed to be pictures of the gospel, right? Here's how they get clear is when we love our spouse like Christ loved our dirty, sinful self, right? So then we help purify that special lady that God put in our life. Like we help her grow closer to Jesus because we're acting like Jesus in her life.
Yeah.
And she gets to have that tangible example of Christ in her life when we love her as Christ loves the church. Now, that's such a tall order because all the men look and yell at us like, yeah, but I'm not Jesus.
She's like, no kidding. Now it is how we've westernized that verse is I'm the boss of you, which is ludicrous to me. Mm-hmm. To say Christ died for the church. I mean, like what it is such the radical way that Jesus elevated women. I mean, they were second-class citizens. I mean, it was unbelievable how he elevated. I mean, how countercultural that whole thing was.
Right.
And so I think when people say, "Oh, it makes me the boss," no, it makes you like going, "Wow, like you got to love her in a crazy, crazy way." And I know that puts pressure on men. At the same time, I think it makes him not be the bully or make him feel like I've got to lead this lesser, right? I've got to lead her. You got to you lead her by loving her. Mm-hmm. I just think we got to push at the end of this thing. What do you want her saying about you at the end of all this?
Right.
What do you want her to say? I mean, do you want to describe you like the fruits of the spirit? I mean, if she's going to know a life of love, it's going to be because you choose to give it to her. And the same with her. I say, can I pick on the women? I think the reason I want to pick on women here is we tend to love, and this is no one's fault. We tend to love like we want to be loved. Mm-hmm. And women can tend to mother and nurture in that way. And a man's desire is to be respected. Women want to be respected too. If you don't believe me, ask them. If you tell a millennial lady she doesn't want to be respected, you're toast. You're done. Because it's just not true. And that's why it goes back to Ephesians 21 going, she wants it too. But I think for ladies, they don't understand that yes, they want respect. They don't understand that it's their husband's core need.
Right.
is to be respected. That's what I want more than anything. I said to Nancy one time, I said, you realize I'd rather you respect me than love you. Love me, right? And she says, okay. And I said, does that make sense? And she goes, not even a little. But to us, I mean, to you guys, Philip, I'm curious with you. You're younger than us. How does that work for your generation or for you when it comes to, because that sounds, the whole respect thing sounds a little parental and a little 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about at this point in time with millennials, and I mean, like you said, you talk to a woman and say, "Oh, well, respect is not in your vocabulary." They're like, "Excuse me, hold on a second." And it's so true though. I mean, with Amy and I, when we're at home, even we were just talking the other day, and I was like, I'm curious, and I was telling her, I was like, I'm curious to know what you think about us being home all the time and spending more time together. She's like, well, I've noticed that you get annoyed with me a little bit easier all of a sudden, and I'm like, and realistically, I laughed, but I had to sit back and I go, man, there were some times where I kind of was like frustrated at kind of how things were going, and I began to think about it. And when we talk about the respect and love, like you were just saying, they do want to be respected, and I try and provide that as well. And especially with us being millennials, I'm all wrapped in that conversation right now with our young adults that we deal with, and talking through all that. um, and I try and keep in mind, I need to respect my wife. I want to respect my wife, but the way that we both receive respect and give respect is very different. And to me, receiving the respect is that show of love, whereas she wants to receive love and affection in a different way. And respect is part of that, but like you said, it's not the core thing that she is looking for, but she still wants it. Just like I still want the type of love that she's expecting from me. It's just not the main thing that I'm looking for. And even when we talk with our young adults, and we have obviously a lot of them that are in relationships, and so we talk with them, and I make sure I tell the guys, very regularly when we sit down and meet. We may meet at Zaxby's or Chick-fil-A, or now over Zoom or whatever, but helping them to understand the role that they do play and are expected to play. And when you talk about that verse 21 through 23 that we just read, it's like, hey, understand that there is an expectation for you as a man, that scripture has given us. And it's hard to wrap your head around. And I try and use the word expectation, because I feel like, as generations go on, there's so many broken homes. There's so many households without the father. And for us to just talk about that, and it's a statistic that obviously is still relevant. And a lot of our guys that we deal with, don't have fathers that are involved or in the picture at all. And so it's like, understand that as a believer, you do have expectation in your household, not to mimic what culture is saying is acceptable, or what you have experienced in your life, but that, hey, if you're going to be a believer and you're going to be a father, you're going to be a husband, there is a way that this has to come together. And so it's been, Amy and I, this year in October will be 4 years for us being married, and so there's still a lot of things that we're figuring out. But for both of us, it has been trying to figure out, how is this marriage really supposed to look when we look at it in context to what Scripture says.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from millennial marriages. I feel like there's a little bit more of an equality that makes sense. Again, some people have so twisted the whole head of the house stuff to be westernized. I think there's an equality there that I love. There's also more experiential. I feel like millennials are more experiential. Trent, we all wanted the stuff. We got the house, the cars, and all those things. And I think millennials are going, we don't need all that. We'd rather go hang out and have fun and be experiential in that way. I've learned a lot from millennials too about how they try to spend time enjoying each other. And there's probably a little bit of a clear voice. Sometimes wives don't feel like they can say something. The question is, do we create a safe place that she can? Because a lot for Nancy, she's an acts of service person, and a lot of times I'll try to do acts of service and what I've learned, if I'll ask her what is it you would want to do? Like, what is that chore you want me to? It's usually smaller, right? It's usually it's not paint the house. It's like, can you feed the dog? And I'm like, dang, I would have wasted all that time painting the room or something. All I do is feed the dog. Now I'm the champ. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't know, Trent. When I think about the love of Christ, and if it's marriage is supposed to represent the relationship between Christ and the church. And again, I've always thought about marriage as being like the greatest marketing tool for the church, because our marriages are supposed to look really authentic and really real, but really, really loving and supportive, that it makes somebody in our cul-de-sac or at work when we used to work, Zoom, those moments to say, what is it they have? Like, what is, because it's so attractive. Like when you sit down with a couple and they're supportive of each other, they talk well about each other when they're not around. They don't try to correct each other's stories. That's one thing that drives me crazy is people correcting their spouse about stupid stuff. Right. Who cares if you showed up at 6:15 instead of 6? Who cares if it happened at Easter instead of Christmas? Shut up. I don't stop. Like, who cares? It's those, have those moments of self-awareness to say, I'm going to treat her really, really good out of reverence for Christ. And what that ultimately does, it makes people, what is that? Because people have such issue with the church right now. The church needs bridges. Yeah. And I feel like, especially if we can help millennials marriages, it could be a great bridge back in the church. Like if the church is known as the ones that know what time it is when it comes to marriages, millennials want a great one. I mean, no one gets married because they don't want it to work. I mean, I think we've got less confidence that it's going to, but most of us want it. And so I think we can get a great opportunity. I don't think a great marriage is made up of people that are a lot alike, right? It's people are very, very different and have learned to love each other anyway. I mean, one of my mentors said he went to a counselor with his wife, and I think they've been married for 25 years at the time. And he says, I want you to fix her, and I want you to fix me. And they just unpacked years worth of her not feeling like she was good enough. And trying to make, and he was a pastor, trying to make her into this person that everybody would accept more. And now he talks about she's a creative, she's fascinating. I mean, Nancy and I have always been on stage, and Nancy's very introverted. So when we were traveling, people would ask me after, because she's firecracker on stage. She's a lot of fun, but when she comes off, she immediately gets quiet. I would have people ask me what's wrong with her that didn't even know her. And so instead of me protecting her, I would try to get her to be more what I thought they were wanting from her. Right. And I don't even know what clicked, but one day I went, isn't it fascinating that she's like that? And then you meet all these other Christian leaders, you're going, there's a lot of them like that. So I think when it's a mind shift, when I finally went, isn't it fascinating that she can be that introverted and yet that extroverted on stage? And it was just that then I didn't feel any pressure to try to make her be anything. And I certainly didn't tell somebody that doesn't even know her that, yeah, you're right. She should be something more that you want her to be, whatever those moments are. But I think it's just, a lot of this is mindset. It's a radical way to love each other. It really is.
And Philip, you brought up something, and Ted, you touched on this about with the millennials, and that is there does seem to be this, because I think that's one of the things that frustrates whatever in the workplace with that generation is they all wanted to be created with the same respect. But the guy that's been serving at the company for 30 years is like, no, I put in this amount of time and you don't get that kind of respect until you put in your dues. And so, but with this millennial generation, there is a natural, like, I respect you, you respect me. But, you go back to Ephesians 22 and 23. I mean, and we a lot of people revolt back when they hear wives submit to your husbands. But then when they see how that's possible is because that husband is loving them like Christ loves them. Like right. That becomes so easy. And where I bring it back to the millennial is that millennials always are looking for someone to follow. Like they're looking for the example to follow. I feel like that generation feels like there's been a lot of bad examples of what not to do. And that's why they always ask the question, why? Why do I need to do it that way? Because there's not been great examples in their lives of why I should do it that way.
Right.
And I think that the cool thing is we get a chance as a church to represent the why. And the why is we are representing Christ and his love for the world and our love to our spouse, to our wives, especially as men. And in that wife feels the freedom to be led by a husband who loves Jesus. And it's just the bar is high. That there's no doubt about that. But if the bar wasn't high, then why would we fight for it?
Right. And I think it's, the Bible tells us men do not be harsh with your wife.
Yeah.
I think some of this, the bar's high, but I think it comes down to, it may not be easy to live out, but God's way to love each other is easy to understand. Who are the people outside your marriage that you're drawn to? It's people that are gentle, that are fun, that are humble. I think for guys, especially, how do I do this? Be gentle, be forgiving, be tough, and be tough in the sense of she can say things and you take it. Like, I watch so many men, if their wives have any emotions, they think it's about them. She's frustrated. Well, it ain't all about you. She may be frustrated with kids. She may be frustrated with COVID-19. Like, to say, she needs to have a place where it's safe for her to be that. So I think how we do this is really like, there's a gentleness and there's a meekness and there is fewer words and there's fewer reactions. And it's just this thing of quit. It's this battle that just starts to quieten. It starts to settle. It starts things not to matter. And I think this is a great time to practice all that.
I kind of bringing this to a little bit of a wrap up because we've had such great, I hate to do that because it's been such great conversation, but I know my listeners and they're not going to listen to me talk much longer. So,
I get it.
But 1 Peter 3:7 says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman. And it says, as the weaker vessel. And again, it's another like misunderstood verse. Like there's this misunderstanding that people think that the scripture here is telling us that, well, women are weak and they're not, as good as men. Like they use this as an equality issue, but that's not what's happening here. It's like, no, God's put this standard for men to follow, to be loving examples of Christ, therefore leading an example. But then he tells the husband to live in such a way with your wives, live in an understanding way. Like you were just talking about, like understanding one, it's not all about you. Understanding she's a more emotional person, just naturally built that way by God. So let her be emotional, and then have grace with her because guess what? Jesus has made her a co-heir to the kingdom just like you,
And you're going to need that grace really soon.
Yeah. Like in the next 2 seconds.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So wrapping kind of things up, Ted, share that story. What are some practical ways that we can be better witnesses of the gospel as Christian marriages? And I've heard you share the story of the Disney World thing, and it just really stuck to me because I really feel like it's just so true of how we're not good examples of the gospel publicly.
Yeah, we're at Disney World back when people could go outside, and you would get as close as possible to as many strangers as you possibly could on a really hot or cold day. So we're standing in line for Space Mountain, and I'm a watcher of relationships, so I'm watching this, and this lady is talking to another family in front of her, and she is like Mickey's sister. She is like the tour guide of, here's the best place to watch fireworks, and here's the greatest place to eat, and here's the way you can get another fast pass, all these things. And she is so sweet. And her husband says, hey, honey. And she turns and she looks at him. She goes, what? And I thought, wow, that she is giving the best of herself to people she will never, ever, ever see again. And I'm like, why don't you save a smidgen of that for him? Um, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know. I think I think it's the safety part. I just think the great news with marriage is it's just a bunch of, I call them micro moves, and they're small, and they're given moment after moment after moment. We've got a chance, these micro moves, to just be kind, to just be respectful, to just let something go that don't make a big deal about, become less opinionated. And people think, they got to talk everything out. Well, there's some things you're not going to understand about your spouse till Jesus takes you home. And we try to work it all out. It's just, how can you be gentle? How can you be sweet? And if the world notices, and they will, that's great. But I think the priority is you loving those people closest to you the most, and God will honor that by letting other people see.
Mm-hmm. What are some practical ways for, husbands to love each other better? What would you say? Like, what is a micro move where you can tell a husband right here that's listening to this podcast, like, hey, here's a micro move to love your wife better, and vice versa. Wives, here's a micro move to love your husband better.
Yeah, I think people tend to love, as Gary Chapman says, try to love like you want to be loved. But what's her love language? What's his love language? What speaks love to them, and then do it. Like for Nancy, for Mother's Day, she doesn't want gifts. She doesn't want flowers. She's acts of service. So, if I help her clean, that's a micro move. For some people, they're words of encouragement. A lot of men are words of encouragement. And it's an insatiable appetite, but at the same time, it's a post-it note that you leave on his computer. Thank you for what you do for our family. Mm-hmm. If whoever washes the clothes at your house, they find a post-it note that says, hey, thank you for doing this. Or somebody walks in and they think they have to fold the clothes because they always have to fold the clothes. The clothes are folded. It's these moments, and there's moments of grace. It's these moments, and they may even be pushing you for a reaction because they want to get a release. Right. But just in those moments, to be more gentle. I think a lot of this, if we would pretend like we were on video, like if we're doing a reality show, then what's our television teaching people? If people are watching right now, to your example of people are watching, what would the story be telling right now? Would people be pulled towards our marriage, or they be repelled toward a marriage? And these aren't big moves. I mean, this isn't, great marriages are not made of big moments and money and great vacations. If that was the case, Hollywood would have the greatest marriages on the planet. Mm-hmm. It's this small stuff. And so if people are watching, are they endeared to you, or will they be repelled? But again, you can't get caught up in something so big. So 30,000 feet is maybe even that example, but what are those small things? And I think if you don't know what those are, you can say, hey, what's one way I can love you today? We're stressed out. I know the two of us have been frustrated. What's something I could do?
Right. Yeah.
And start with the small ticket items that actually end up to be huge.
And, I think that's a good advice there, because here's the truth. We change over time, right? So what used to be a small way of loving your wife, for whatever reason, that doesn't excite her anymore. That doesn't, fill her tank anymore. I mean, she likes that you do X, Y, or Z, but, I've shifted, I've matured, I've learned something different, so that conversation of continue just because you've been married, like Lacey and I've been married for 20 years, and you would think we would know each other really, really well, but I still have to ask things, like, hey, how does this make you feel? Do you still like this? I wanted to buy her a piece of jewelry last summer for our 20th. And she's like, when I did give her a gift and I told her what I was going to buy her, she said, I'm so glad you didn't buy me that. I would have hated it. And I was like,
yeah.
I mean, I was gung ho trying to find that thing, and it just didn't materialize. And wow, that would have been huge because I didn't ask, and I think sometimes we overcomplicate it and we just say, we feel like we have to be mind readers and we don't,
Yeah, that's good, Trent. That's Trent. Yeah, everybody's evolving, nobody knows but them. And some people go, their spouse may be so angry with them right now that they want nothing. I don't want anything from you. So you could get that. And even then, you still choose love, you know.
If you get that, then be a little bit more stealthy. Go on her Pinterest page and find out what she's been looking at. You know?
Yeah. Ask your friend, ask your sister. Like, she's probably been talking about you anyway. So
That's right. Go on the Instagram cart, see what she's been taking in and putting out, you know.
That's right.
All right. So last practical tip here. I think we kind of scratched the surface on this too, and that is there's some really good marriages out there. Some
right.
people.
I'm going to plug in computer right here for all those visual learners. Sorry.
No problem.
I just got this big alert that says I'm on 5%. So sorry. Okay, back to you.
No problem.
Perfect.
So, there's some really good marriages out there, but I think we kind of have this mindset, unfortunately, in Christian world that mind your own business. There's no like looking to set examples or bring people into understanding of how to live life together. And that's a shame. And so for the couples that, let's say they're listening to this and they're like, well, me and my wife, we're kind of in a good place, you know, or maybe COVID-19 has really solved some of those things that we were having because we had that pause moment in life and time to work through some things, and we're in a good place, you know. What would you say to that couple? Like, how can that couple use that breakthrough or use their life or that marriage that it is good? What would you say to them?
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think they could ask, they could ask their pastor. You know, I bet you, Trent, would love it if 6 couples from your church called and said, you know what, we're not perfect, but we've certainly enjoyed each other and we've certainly found some hope. Is there any couple that could use a Zoom call? Or maybe you know who that couple is that you could pour into. Sometimes it's better for a guy to go to guy and a lady go to lady, because I know that can be intimidating. Don't use the word mentor with them, but that's a little bit of the setup or discipleship. How can you pour into somebody else? How can you give them encouragement? I think now is the perfect time for that. So if you're a believer, ask your pastor, is there anybody that needs us right now that could help you keep people out of your office even that we could pour into? So I think continuing to model it is important. And here's the thing, just like you just said, we keep changing. So doing great now, but just keep doing what you're doing, right? Like none of us ever arrive, because as soon as we get settled, something big's can shift.
Right. It's like a river, right? We got to keep paddling or you go backwards, you know.
That is right.
Well, I think this has been really fun today. Thanks, Ted, for taking some time with us and investing in our people, our audience, and with what you learned and just the ministry God's given you. So thanks for being a part of the Paradox Culture podcast. And we're going to put this out there. And what I want you to do, Ted, is tell our audience how they can connect with you, because you've got some great material out there. You've got some great resources, and I want them to connect with you in a way beyond just this podcast. So give the audience some ideas how we can continue that relationship.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people have more time to listen to audio or to read. I have a book called Your Best Us. It was a book we wrote for people who don't like marriage books. It's 100 pages, or there's an audio version. I love audiobooks. So it's called Your Best Us, Marriage is Easier Than You Think. The other thing I'm excited about is we have a membership. It's part of Orange, part of our company. It's called, you can find it at marriedpeople.org/home. Actually, you can go to marriedpeople.org and you'll see 2 routes. You can go here's how you help churches, but on the other side is here's couples membership. And so I went to our leadership and I said, God, people really seem to be hurting right now. Can I give it away? And within 30 seconds, they were like, of course. So it's what I've wanted to do anyway. I'm not sure how long we can do it, but for now, people can get 6 months of it for free. So if they go to marriedpeople.org/home, sign up. It's got all these, it's got date nights and videos and messages and small group studies. There's even a COVID-19 section that we've put together that I'm really pleased with, that we've gotten a lot of great comments about. So if nothing else, people could go there, register, read that, and unsubscribe. So, they don't have to put their credit card in or anything. They put their name and their email and it's theirs. And so that's, it's very funny. As soon as we said you can have it, people took it.
Like,
right?
yes, absolutely. I'll take that.
I'll take it. I'll take it, which has been really fun. But yeah, that's where I would point them to, one of those two resources.
That's awesome. Definitely. We will put that in the show notes so that you can get there by the click of the link after you've listened or watched the podcast. And also just a quick promo, like I said earlier in the podcast, we will be hosting your best night in this Friday night at 7:30 on First Baptist Snellville's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So make sure you go there and be a part of that. It is, Ted and Nancy did a fantastic job, and not only just them, he recruited a bunch of his friends that do marriage conferences and books and podcasts, and brought them all to one place. And it's about an hour and 20 minutes, I think, was the total watch time, and it was well worth every minute of it. So join us at 7:30 this coming Friday, May 15th. We'll hope you'll connect with us through that Facebook Live and on our YouTube channel. So, Philip, thanks for being here today. You did a great job. And Ted, again, can't thank you enough. Appreciate you coming on this podcast with us.
You bet. My pleasure.
So, as always, like, subscribe, find us on Spotify and iTunes, as well as YouTube, and continue to follow the Paradox Culture podcast as we dive in and look forward to episode number 7 coming up. Thanks again for being here, Ted. We'll talk to you soon.